The Trump administration announced its zero-tolerance immigration policy last spring and began separating families who cross the U.S. border illegally. The administration ended that policy after 11 weeks. 60 Minutes Overtime followed one woman who had her daughter taken from her for more than 3 months.
My name is Oriana Zill, and I'm a producer at 60 Minutes working on a story about immigrant children separated at the border. We found out that dozens of the children who were separated from their parents at the southern border were sent by the government thousands of miles away to a foster care facility in Harlem, New York called Cayuga. Before that, we had been thinking about the children as numbers. How many were there? Where were they? It hit home, and we decided to see if we could find some of the families of these children. We found Susanna, who had gotten released from detention and was living with her family in Virginia. Her family had spent a month trying to locate Susanna's daughter, Lizzie, and they'd found her at Cayuga. This was a case where the mother knew where the daughter was less than 300 miles away from her, but couldn't get to her, couldn't see her, and could barely talk to her on the phone, usually less than twice a month. Her daughter was not handling the separation very well. If you could see how my little girl has suffered, Susanna said. I've heard her cry and scream. These are words I'm going to carry with me for my whole life.
Hola, buenos días.
Hello.
After countless phone calls and months of dealing with red tape, Susanna finally got word that the government would fly her 7-year-old daughter to her in Washington, D.C. We were there that day to film the reunion with her daughter. Susanna was crying. She was incredibly emotional, and I don't think she felt or believed that her reunion was actually going to happen. She had been waiting so long, she didn't believe her daughter was going to arrive. But eventually she did, and it's a beautiful moment. Lizzie had been alone without her mother for 3 months and 20 days, and you can tell. I stayed with the family for another hour, and I observed Lizzie say to her mother over and over again, "Are they coming to take me away again?" Susanna told me that the family's much happier because they're together.
All right, so Peter Vincent is the former general counsel for ICE and a former senior official in the Department of Homeland Security. Thank you so much for joining us, Peter. Peter, you worked in the Obama administration. The Obama administration dealt with immigration issues during your time in government. And President Trump has said, look, the Obama administration did the same thing. They separated immigrant families. Is he right about that?
Anne-Marie, the president, with all due respect to that office that he holds, is absolutely incorrect. I saw the tweet from this morning, and I can tell you that having worked with a small group of individuals to deal with a massive, unprecedented influx in 2014 of unaccompanied children, we were very cognizant of the sensitivity of dealing with that very serious issue. About 50,000 children between January and early summer of 2014 were in the United States. We worked very closely with their colleagues at Health and Human Services to have them placed with their families, with their parents, or with guardians. The Bush administration likewise dealt with a similar situation. Under no circumstances did either the Bush administration or the Obama administration issue any sort of blanket policy separating children from their parents.
So what do you view as sort of the causes behind this current situation with migrants on the southern border? I don't really believe we've seen the sort of images that we saw over the weekend. I don't believe we've seen at all, if ever. Certainly in a long time, but I can't recall if ever we've seen images like that.
Anne-Marie, there have been much smaller surges at the border. There are both push and pull factors, predominantly from the so-called Northern Triangle countries of Honduras, El Salvador, and Guatemala. Individuals that are fleeing criminal street gangs that are extraordinarily violent in all three countries, individuals who are simply looking for greater economic or educational opportunities for their children. What is different about this latest surge is that the Trump administration issued an order, a directive, requiring all individuals that are seeking asylum to only seek them at official U.S. ports of entry at the southern border. That is in direct violation of both U.S. law and U.S. treaty obligations under international law, which, as you know, Anne-Marie, allows individuals who are in the United States illegally or legally, who enter either through ports of entry or around ports of entry, to apply for asylum once they are in the United States. So now individuals are being forced to wait in less than ideal situations and conditions in Mexico, and many of them have been forced to wait many, many weeks, if not months.
Let's talk about the fallout of this, that the president says, you know, these migrants will have to wait on the Mexican side of the border. The incoming Mexican government says, look, they haven't hammered out any sort of deal with the American government because they're not in power yet. The mayor of Tijuana is straining, says his city is straining under the pressure of having to house and clothe and, you know, check the health of all of these migrants. What are the consequences here?
The consequences are pretty severe in terms of how the rest of the world now views the United States, which has proudly been a safe haven for individuals fleeing violence, persecution, and looking for greater opportunities. The United States government, when I was with the Obama administration, worked very closely with our excellent counterparts, not only in Mexico, but in Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras, to come up with an inclusive, whole-of-community approach to dealing with issues when they come up like this. I was a little confused by President Obama's tweet of just a few days ago regarding an agreement with the incoming Mexican government, which does not take office until December 1st. I think the Mexicans have backed away from that now. But there are significant consequences to the United States' reputation, but more importantly to the humanitarian crisis at our southern border, involving the vast majority of people who are women and children simply fleeing violence and looking for a safe place.
Indeed, Peter, you said President Obama. I believe you meant President Trump. But Peter Vincent, thank you so much.